Welcome everyone to this week's Wednesday webinar. Today we are going to be talking about calculated columns and measures in Power BI. So just first to talk about the difference between a calculated column versus a measure. So when you're looking at calculated columns, that is creating an extension of the table that is evaluated at the row level. So if you have columns that maybe have debit and credit amounts and you want to know the total, you can set up a calculated column that takes credits minus debit, or you could set up, maybe you have daily columns where you want to know the whole week and you have a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday column. You could add all those together and it evaluates at each individual row level. The data in a calculated column only updates when the data is refreshed. So if you have it on automatic refresh or you're manually refreshing it, or when you initially set up the calculated column, that is when the calculations will be performed. A measure seems very similar to a calculated column. You can use very similar formulas, and you can achieve a lot of the same things. The main difference is a measure doesn't calculate at the individual row level. It's applying a formula to a particular grouping, either within the visual. So if you have a visual at a divisional level, it's going to apply that formula to all of the rows that roll up into that division, or any other filters that you have on the page. So if you have a filter on the page for a particular salesperson or manager, when those filters are changed, that formula is going to recalculate and will provide a total based on that filter. So with that, we do see that measures will update each time there is a change of filters on the report. This is important to note because if you have a lot of them or a lot of data, with them changing every time filters are changed, that can affect report performance. So if you want to have 15 measures and you're pulling 20 million rows of data, you definitely could see some report performance. And it might be worth looking at things that you could achieve in a calculated column. There's two types of measures, and we'll take a look at both today. There's quick or normal. It really is just a difference in how you enter them. And so we'll look a little closer at that. So a couple of things to think about. Why would you choose a calculated column over a measure, or vice versa? Why would you want to use a measure? There really isn't a hard rule. In some instances, you probably could use either a calculated column or measure to get the end result on your report. There are some situations where only one option will work, or only one option will give you the correct answer. So the things to note, we already talked about calculated columns are going to use less resources because they only update when the report data is refreshed, where measures update every time something is changed. So that's something to think about when you're choosing calculated column or measure. Another important consideration is where it's evaluated at. So if you want to know, let's say, an average sale price, and you enter a calculated column and you say, okay, give me an average. You're getting an average at every row level. And then if you place that on the face of your report and you say, okay, I want to see the average of all of these, and you use that same column, it's going to add together all of those averages and come up with an average of the average. So that wouldn't be the correct answer in that one. In those ones, when you're doing things like that, you would maybe want to do a measure that takes, okay, show me all my sales minus all my returns, and then divide that by the total number of sales we did so I can get an average sale price. And that's actually an example that we're going to look at here in a little bit. So you also do have to think about what you are looking to analyze and where you need it to be based on. If it can be based on the row level, calculated column is a great option. If you need to measure it more on groupings, such as I want to know a profitability or productivity for this particular division, and so we need to take, maybe everything that was ordered, the total number of days it took to ship each one, and some fancy calculations, measures are probably a better option. A couple other things to consider is calculated columns cannot use measures in a formula. So if you create a measure and then you want to have another calculated column, you cannot reference the measure you created in the formula for the calculated column. And then with measures, measures cannot be used as filters in a slicer or at the page and report levels. So you can use measures to analyze data and show it on your report, but you can't use that as filters. So with that being said, let's go ahead and pull up our example report here, and we're going to go through some of the different ways that we can add columns and measures. So I'm just looking at a sales transaction set of data here, and I've got a couple of filters on the report already, and I have started a matrix where we are looking at the customer name, and we're going to do some calculations for the different sales information. The first thing we're going to do is we are going to put a calculated column together, and what we want to do, we can see here on the right-hand side, we have quite a few different aging buckets. We don't want to know each of these aging buckets. We just want a column that shows us, give me the total of everything that is outstanding for this customer. So I'm going to select the table here, and I'm going to say I want to add a new column. And in this column, we are going to title Total Customer Balance. And on the other side of the formula, we are going to say we want to take, and I'm just going to start typing in the name of the field, and you can see that it's popping up. I want to take aging bucket 1. I want to add the second bucket. I want to add the third, the fourth, and let's keep going down the line here. 5th, 6th, and the 7th one. So we've added all of that together, and I'm going to go ahead and hit the check mark. And if there are any problems while you're entering your formulas, you will have a red bar appear here, and usually the error message pops up below your little formula bar. All of these formulas are written in DAX, and that is very similar to Excel formulas. This is just slightly different because it's made to work with the relational data that Power BI uses. So you can see now this total customer balance appears as a field. And if we actually look at the table itself, and I look at the sales transactions table here, if I scroll all the way to the right, that total customer balance field exists on the table at the row level. So let's go back here, and we're going to say we want to see that total customer balance right here on the page. Now, one thing that we notice, this is giving us that total customer balance, and it's summing up each of those rows. So if we have a customer that has multiple sales transactions, like we see here for this customer, it is taking that customer balance at every row level and summing it up. This customer doesn't really owe us $1.1 million. So we can use a quick measure, or we can also just change the summarization for this column. So I just want to show you both ways here. So a quick measure, let's go up here to the toolbar, and we can select quick measure from here. Or if you know the field that you're going to use in the quick measure, you can select it directly from the field pane. So I'm going to go to more options because I want to do a quick measure based on this total customer balance. I'm going to hit the little ellipsis and go to new quick measure. What this does is once I select the measure type, it is going to automatically pop in that column to be used in the measure. So for quick measures, there's a few different aggregations, filters, time intelligence, totals, some basic mathematical operations, and some text operations. Specifically with this, I want to see just the maximum amount of the customer balance because it's the same on every row. I don't want it summarized. So I'm going to say max per category. And you can see here it's giving me that base value of that total customer balance. It's defaulting to sum, which I'm not interested in. I want to change it to maximum. And then I'm going to select a category, and I'm going to say I want to know this by the customer name. I'm going to select OK, and then the quick measure is going to pop in over here, max of total customer balance per customer name. If I pull that onto my matrix here, now we can see it's just pulling in that maximum amount. So this is definitely something you can achieve with a quick measure, but I want to show you something slightly different. Here on the total customer balance, if I select this drop-down arrow, it says it's defaulting to the summarization. If I want it to just show me the maximum amount on any of those rows, I just select maximum, and you can see it's the same. I just wanted to highlight that out. I don't use quick measures a lot unless I'm doing that basic calculation. Maybe I have something that's coming over that I need to divide by 100 to make it a percentage. For formatting purposes, I might use a quick measure for something like that. But overall, I use more of the full measures, entering more complex DAX formulas. So let's go ahead and get rid of this quick measure we entered. So now we've got, here's our max of the total customer balance, so we can see how much this customer owes us. So now let's start looking at a couple measures. What we want to achieve here, when we're looking at our sales transactions and we expand this, we can see there's some invoices, and you can't really tell it from the numbers, but we have invoices, we have returns, things like that. So if I were just to summarize the document amount, it would take all of the costs from all the invoices, and then it would add all of the costs from the returns, and that's definitely not an accurate picture. So we're going to use a couple of measures to calculate total and average sales. And for a measure, we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to select the table. The reason I like to select the table is whatever table you have selected at the time you choose new measure, that is the table that measure is going to appear under. You can change which table it appears under later on, but I always find it helpful to start out with the one I wanted under at the beginning. So I'm going to go ahead and select new measure, and it's going to look very similar to a calculated column. This time it just says measure on the left-hand side. And I'm going to give this one a title. We're going to say total sales. And I'm going to go through the formula here pretty quick. That's something that definitely can be covered later to learn more about formulas. But it is important to note the difference between calculated columns and measures is you do have to use aggregations to reference a particular column within a table. So here we're going to say we want to calculate, and we want to take the total amount for everything that's an invoice and then subtract the total amount for everything that's a return. So this is where we need to use an aggregation because it's a measure versus just being able to put the column that we want to start with. So we're going to say we want a sum of, and now I can start typing in a particular column, that document amount. So I'm going to say summarize the document amount, and I want to filter it from that sales transaction table, and I want to look specifically at the SOP type, and if it's an invoice, I want it to sum that document amount. And I'm going to say, okay, there's my first number, everything in the document amount from the invoice. Now I want to subtract, and I'm going to calculate again. And it doesn't matter if it's capitalized or lowercase, the formula will work the same. That's just personal preference or what you're doing at the moment if you forget to turn off your caps locks. So here we're going to say now we want to calculate the sum of that document amount again. This time, we're going to filter still that sales transaction table and still that SOP type. But now we want the SOP type to equal return. So when we look at this, and I've closed off this calculate, so we're calculating here the first part. This is saying sum up the document amount if it's an invoice. Now we're going to subtract the document amount if it's a return. And I'm going to hit my little check mark. And now you see the total sales appears here as a measure. When you have a measure, if we go back to the table and we're looking at this sales transaction table, you'll notice it doesn't appear here on the right-hand side because it is not at that row level. So it's not going to appear on the table visual. It's just available under the fields for you to use on your report. So if I pull total sales here, now we can see this is the total amount that that customer has purchased minus everything they have returned. So if we want to know an average sale amount, we can do another measure. We couldn't do a calculated column because we can't refer to that total sales in a calculated column, and we wouldn't want to anyways since we're looking at average sales. And there's two ways you could achieve this. You could take this very same measure here, you could copy it over to a new one, and then you could just add a divide section and divide by what we're going to here in a moment. But you also can refer to other measures when you create a new one. So that's what we're going to do in this case. We're going to create a new measure. And we're going to say this is going to be average sale. And instead of putting that whole long calculating the total sales amount, we're just going to say, start typing in total sales. We can do this because we're referring to a measure. We don't have to provide like a sum of total sales or anything like that. We're just going to say, take total sales and divide that. Now we do have to put a formula in here with some aggregation because we don't have like total distinct sales transactions. So we're going to say on this one, we want to calculate, and we're going to look at the distinct count of the SOP numbers. So we're looking specifically at that SOP number, so invoice number or return number, we're looking specifically at that SOP number, the invoice numbers. And we are going to say we want to filter out in that sales transaction table any that have the SOP type of invoice. So we're going to divide that total sales amount by the number of invoices that that particular grouping has. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the check mark here. And now we have an average sale price. And if I pull that onto the table, we can see now when we're looking at a particular customer, we have here's how much each of the customers owe us in total. Here's the total sales, again, being specific to everything invoiced minus everything returned. And then here's that average sale. So on average per invoice, how much our customer is spending with us. And it takes into account what they return off those invoices as well. So when we're looking at this, we talked about how the measures can change every time you filter. So we've got a couple filters over here, and we're looking at, here's all of our customers, all of the information. So if I select Greg, and you see it happens pretty quickly. I only have a couple measures. I don't have a lot of data, but the total sales and the average sale both recalculated. And now we see here are Greg's customers, here are the different total sales, average sales, and that maximum customer balance for Greg. And this also works, the other filter that I have in here, if we look at 2026, we look specifically at Q2, you can see that we have still that max of the customer balance, the total sales, 1,050 here, average sale, they only have one invoice. If we look here at our Cedar Family Counseling, we can see the total sales and the average sale for them. And kind of a neat thing that you can see, so when we looked at Cedar Family Counseling was one of the ones we looked at in that quarter. Here you can see, they have that 32,000, almost 33,000 for their total sales, and their average sale is a lot higher over all of their data. But when we had filtered specifically to that quarter, that total sales and average sale did recalculate down, and that's why it was less than 1,000 on both sides.
So this is definitely giving you some more information about how you can use calculated columns and measures. There's definitely some things to think about when you are setting them up, but they are a super helpful tool. Anytime you want to analyze or look into your data more, it can definitely help with what you see on your report. We definitely welcome you to connect with us. Go to our website. You can email us if you have questions at support@iscore.biz. You can also find us online on many, if not all, well, maybe not all, but many of the social media channels. I thank you so much for spending a little bit of time with me today, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Thank you very much.